I thought my brother and I were working on a business together. Then I found out he had launched it without me and told investors I backed out. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I stared at my phone, the screen lighting up with the message from William, one of the key investors we had been working with. Excited for the launch today. Rob told me you decided to step back, but I still wanted to congratulate you. This is huge. My breath caught in my throat. Step back? I never stepped back. I was supposed to be in that meeting. I was supposed to be there when we launched. But now, somehow Rob had gone ahead without me. I fumbled with my laptop, my hands shaking as I opened up our business website. And there was the company I had spent years building, the brand I had designed, the pitch deck I had worked on late into the nights while Rob handled the investors. All of it live. And the worst part? My name was nowhere to be found. I grabbed my keys and was out the door in seconds. Rob's office wasn't far. I had been there 100 times before. Our office as I had thought of it. The place we had worked out of for months, preparing for this moment. I stormed through the doors, ignoring the receptionist's surprised greeting. I didn't stop walking until I burst into the conference room. And there he was. Rob standing in front of a room full of investors. Smiling, laughing, talking like he had built this company from the ground up. Like I hadn't been there for every single moment. He saw me immediately. His smile faltered for just a split second. Then he recovered. Ah, he said, spreading his arms. There she is. My sister. Everyone, this is Natalie. Every head in the room turned toward me. I barely registered the polite nods from the investors. My heart was hammering in my chest, my vision tunneling in on Rob. My brother. The person I had trusted more than anyone. I took a step forward, my voice dangerously steady. What the hell is this? Rob had the audacity to laugh, waving it off. Nat, let's talk outside. No, my voice cut through the room. We're talking now. In front of everyone. A few investors exchanged looks. Good. Let them see. Let them see the truth. William, the investor who had unknowingly tipped me off, cleared his throat. Is there a problem? I turned to him. Yeah, William, there is. Because I didn't step back from this company. I shot Rob a glare. That was a lie. Murmurs spread through the room. I took another step forward, my fists clenched. I spent years building this. I was the one who came up with the concept. I was the one who secured half these meetings. And now you're standing here acting like you did this alone. Rob's expression darkened. Nat, let's not make a scene. A scene. I let out a sharp laugh. You stole my business and you're worried about a scene? The tension in the room thickened. William leaned back in his chair, looking between us. Rob, what's she talking about? Rob hated being put on the spot. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers twitched at his side. But then he recovered. He plastered on a casual smile and turned back to the investors. Listen, this is all just a miscommunication. My sister and I, he shot me a look. We had some differences in direction, and she decided this wasn't the right fit for her. I clenched my teeth. He was so good at lying. So good at twisting things just enough to sound reasonable. I turned to the investors, my voice cutting through the room. That's not true. I never backed out. I was supposed to be in these meetings. I was supposed to be here today. William frowned. Rob, she's saying she was still involved. Rob let out a fake, exasperated sigh. Look, he said as if he were the reasonable one. This is exactly why we didn't move forward together. Natalie is passionate, but she's emotional about this. I had to make some tough business decisions. My blood boiled. You mean you had to cut me out so you could take all the credit? He spread his hands, feigning innocence. I made the best decision for the company. You weren't ready for this, Nat. That was the final straw. I took a slow, deep breath. And then I looked around the room. William, I said, my voice clear and strong. You know how hard I worked on this business, don't you? He nodded cautiously. Yeah, you were the one who set up our first meetings. I turned to another investor. And you, didn't I personally write up the proposal we sent you? Another nod. Slowly, I watched realization dawn on their faces. The cracks in Rob's carefully crafted lie were starting to show. But I wasn't done yet. I turned back to him, my voice cold. You stole from me. My ideas. My business. My future. And if you think I'm just going to walk away quietly, I took a step closer, looking him dead in the eye. Then you really don't know me at all. Silence. For the first time, Rob didn't have a comeback. As he could lie all he wanted. But now people were watching. And I wasn't going anywhere. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, all the signs were there, but I ignored them because I wanted to believe in my brother. I wanted to believe that, for once, we were equals. That this wasn't just another one of those times when Rob took something from me, assumed it was his by default, and left me scrambling to pick up the pieces. Maybe that was my mistake. Not realizing that we had always been playing two different games. I had been trying to build something real while Rob had been waiting for the right moment to take it. I could still hear his voice in my head from months ago when I first brought up the idea of starting this business together. Are you sure about this? He had asked, leaning back in his chair with that familiar lazy smirk, the one that always made me feel like he was humoring me. I mean, do you really think you can handle running a whole company? I had forced a smile, even though something about his tone had irritated me. Yes, Rob. I've been working on this for years. I just think we'd make a good team. You're great at pitching and I'm better at operations. We balance each other out. He had pretended to think about it, but I knew then what I know now. He never had any intention of being my partner. He had just been waiting to see if it was worth taking. I had been the one who put in the early work, who mapped out the business plan, who spent years saving money so we could launch without relying entirely on outside investors. I had been the one reading legal guides, drafting partnership agreements, learning the boring but essential parts of running a company. Rob was good at talking, at making people believe in him, at getting people excited without actually doing the hard work. Which is why I had thought we would make a good team. I knew my own weaknesses. I hated public speaking. I didn't have Rob's confidence when it came to negotiating. But I knew this business inside and out. I had built it from the ground up and I had been willing to share that with him. I just hadn't realized that Rob never saw me as a partner. To him, I was just a stepping stone. The first red flag had been small. Barely noticeable at the time. I had been working late one night perfecting our pitch deck when Rob had walked in, glancing over my shoulder. You should let me present this, he had said casually. I had frowned but shrugged. That's fine. You're better at speaking than I am. Exactly, he had said, clapping me on the shoulder. You do the numbers, I'll do the talking. That's how we work best, right? At the time it had felt harmless. It made sense. I was better at the numbers. Rob was better at talking. But I should have paid closer attention. Because every time we met with investors after that, Rob was the one leading the conversation. I wasn't just in the background. I was barely acknowledged at all. At first, I told myself I was just being paranoid. He always introduced me, always called me his brilliant sister, who was handling all the behind-the-scenes work. But slowly the introductions became shorter. His explanations became more vague. And before I knew it, I was being left out of key meetings entirely. I had pushed back once, just a few weeks before the launch. Rob, I need to be in those investor meetings, I had said, crossing my arms as I watched him type away at his laptop. I've been working on this just as much as you have. He hadn't even looked up. I know, but investors don't want to deal with both of us. They like things clean and simple. One face for the company, you know? I had gritted my teeth. I don't want to be cleaned out of my own company. Rob had finally glanced up at me then, his expression carefully neutral. Nat, come on. Don't make this about ego. You're good at what you do, but I'm the one who can sell it. That's just how business works. I had felt something uneasy twist in my stomach. But he had said it so casually, so confidently, that I had convinced myself I was just overthinking it. Because why would Rob betray me? I had ignored the other red flags too. The contracts that never got finalized. The way he kept pushing off legal paperwork, saying it wasn't urgent. The way he always insisted on handling investor calls alone. It wasn't until I stood in that conference room, staring at my business with my name erased from it, that I realized the truth. He had been planning this for months. He had been waiting for the right moment to cut me out. And now, standing in front of those investors, he had done it. He had stolen my work. And worst of all, no one seemed surprised. William and the other investors looked uncomfortable, but none of them looked shocked. Because why would they? Rob had told them his version first. He had been planting the idea for weeks, maybe even longer, that I was hesitant. That I was nervous about leading a company. That I had backed out. And now, standing there, I realized the truth. He had been erasing me long before the launch. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to stop shaking. If Rob thought I was just going to walk away, let him have everything I had built, he was in for a rude awakening. I had spent years working for this. I wasn't about to let him steal it without a fight. I walked out of that conference room with my head held high, but the moment I stepped outside, the weight of everything hit me all at once. I had just exposed my brother in front of his investors. I had put everything out in the open. But had it made a difference? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but my thoughts were racing. Rob had been preparing for this for months. He had built his version of the story carefully, little by little, so that when this moment came, he could dismiss me as emotional, difficult, and unprofessional. And the worst part? Some of them believed him. I could see it in their faces: hesitation, doubt. Was I telling the truth? Or was I just a bitter sibling who couldn't handle being pushed out of a business deal? The thought made me feel sick. I had been the one to build this company. I had been the one to research, to plan, to put in the real work. And now, because Rob got to the investors first, I was the one who had to fight to prove I even belonged there. I wasn't going to let that happen. I took out my phone and started making calls. The first one was to William. He was the only investor I trusted even a little. After all, he had been the one to tip me off in the first place, even if he didn't realize it. He picked up after 2 rings. "Natalie," he said, his tone cautious. "I need to meet with you," I said, skipping the small talk. "Alone." There was a pause. Then, "I don't know if that's a good idea. This is already messy enough." I clenched my jaw. "Then you need to hear the truth. The real truth. Because if you back Rob, you're backing a fraud." Another pause. Then a sigh. "All right. I'll give you 10 minutes." That was all I needed. I met him at a coffee shop an hour later. He looked as uncomfortable as I felt, but I wasn't here to beg. I was here to set the record straight. I opened my laptop and pulled up every document I had. Notes. Meeting minutes. Drafts of our pitch deck, all of them with my edits. Emails with investors that I had initiated. I didn't just tell him the story. I showed him. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I saw doubt flicker across his face. Not doubt in me, but in Rob. "This doesn't look like someone who stepped back," he admitted, scrolling through the endless trail of work I had done. "That's because I didn't," I said firmly. "Rob took everything and pretended I didn't exist." William leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his chin. "I won't lie to you, Natalie. This is a mess. Investors don't like mess." "I know. And Rob is very persuasive." "I know that too." He hesitated, then looked at me carefully. "What do you want, Natalie?" I took a slow breath. "I want my name back. I want my company back." William studied me for a long moment, then finally nodded. "I'll see what I can do." It wasn't a promise, but it was something. And in that moment I knew one thing for sure. Rob wasn't going to get away with this. Not this time. The next few days were chaos. I started reaching out to everyone: investors, business contacts, even some of our early supporters. I didn't badmouth Rob, I didn't make it personal. I just showed them the truth. Little by little, the cracks in his story started to show. And then something unexpected happened. A journalist reached out to me. They had caught wind of the story, probably from one of the investors who didn't want to be caught in a scandal, and wanted my side of things. At first I hesitated. I didn't want to turn this into a public fight. But then I thought about Rob standing in that conference room smiling like he had won. And I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every person who had ever been pushed out of their own success. So I agreed to the interview. The article came out 2 days later. "Siblings turned business partners, or business rivals. The story behind a startup feud." It wasn't biased toward me, but it wasn't biased toward Rob either. It laid out everything. How we had started this company together. How I had been deeply involved from the beginning. How Rob had strategically removed me from meetings and launched the company under his name alone. And most importantly, how the legal side of things wasn't as secure as Rob had made it seem. That part hit him where it hurt. Because if there was one thing investors hated more than bad press, it was uncertainty. And suddenly, Rob's company wasn't looking as solid as he had made it out to be. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Rob called me. For the first time since I had confronted him in the conference room, he actually picked up the phone and called me. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Nat," he said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything. I let him fill the silence. This is getting out of control, he said. The investors are panicking. We need to come to an agreement. I let out a slow breath, leaning back in my chair. An agreement? You can still be part of this, he said, his voice quick and eager like he was trying to sell me on something. We can fix this. You just need to stop. I laughed. Actually laughed. Stop. I said. Stop what, Rob? Telling the truth. He exhaled sharply. You know this isn't just about the truth. It's about perception. You're making this worse for both of us. I shook my head. No, Rob. You made this worse when you stole my company. Silence. Then finally he muttered, I should have handled things differently. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was the closest thing I was ever going to get from him. And it didn't change anything. I wasn't just going to let this go. Rob had made one fatal mistake. He had assumed I would stay quiet. He had assumed I would let him win. But now I had the truth on my side. And I was going to make sure everyone saw it. Rob had underestimated me. He thought he could talk his way out of this, charm his way back into control, convince me that fighting him would only make things worse. But he had already taken everything. What did I have left to lose? The problem was I had built this business for the long run, brick by brick, carefully laying the foundation. Rob had rushed to launch, eager for attention, eager to prove himself before he was ready. Now that the truth was out, cracks were forming fast and the whole thing was on the verge of collapse. I wasn't going to let him take me down with him. The morning after his call, I got an email from one of the major investors. William had been pulling strings behind the scenes and now, others were starting to doubt Rob's version of the story. The email was short and professional, but the message was clear. We need to talk. I didn't hesitate. I arrived at the investor's office an hour later, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to expect. They could have called me in to smooth things over, or they could have been trying to convince me to back down. But when I walked in, I saw Rob sitting there too, arms crossed, looking as if he had just been put through the ringer. That gave me hope. The lead investor, a man named Daniel, gestured for me to sit. He didn't waste time. Natalie, we've gone through your documents, he said, tapping his fingers on the desk. It's clear you had a significant role in this company's creation. I didn't relax. Not yet. Rob tells us there was a miscommunication, Daniel continued, glancing at him. That you two had disagreements on the direction of the company, and he moved forward when you decided to step back. Rob nodded quickly, seizing the opportunity. That's exactly it. I should have handled it better, I should have communicated more, but I wasn't trying to cut Natalie out. I held back a scoff. He was still trying to control the story, still trying to act like this had been some unfortunate misunderstanding instead of outright theft. I met Daniel's gaze. That's a lie. Rob stiffened. Come on, Nat. I turned to the investors. Let's be clear. Rob didn't just move forward without me. He actively changed contracts, removed my name from documents, and made sure I was locked out of major decisions. I opened my bag and pulled out the proof. Emails. Messages. Records of the moments Rob had deliberately sidelined me. I laid them out on the table. For the first time since this had started, Rob looked nervous. Daniel flipped through the documents, his brow furrowing. The room was silent except for the sound of paper shifting. When he looked back up, his expression was unreadable. This is a serious issue, he said finally. The last thing we want is a legal battle that could damage the company's reputation before it even gets off the ground. Rob leaned forward. Exactly, which is why. Daniel cut him off with a raised hand. Which is why we need to fix this. Immediately. Rob looked momentarily relieved, like he thought the investors were about to side with him. Then Daniel turned to me. Natalie, what do you want? Rob's head snapped toward me. I could feel the tension in the air the moment everything shifted. I had all the power now. I let the silence hang for a second, watching the way Rob fidgeted, the way he clenched his jaw, realizing that he had finally lost control of the situation. Then I spoke. I want my share of the company back, I said. Full rights, full ownership of my role. And I want Rob to make a public statement acknowledging that I was a co-founder, not just some assistant who walked away. Rob paled. Nat, you can't be serious. I turned to him sharply. You didn't think I was serious when you stole my business either, did you? Daniel leaned back, considering. That's fair. Rob let out a frustrated breath. You're going to ruin this company over a technicality? I clenched my fist. You already did. Silence. Daniel exchanged a glance with the other investors, then nodded. We can work with that. But Rob, he fixed him with a sharp look. This situation can't happen again. We invest in people we trust, and right now your credibility isn't looking great. That landed like a punch. Rob flinched. I almost smiled. It wasn't about the money for him. It wasn't about the business. It was about his image. No. His reputation was cracking. That was worth more than anything. The meeting ended shortly after that, and when I walked out, Rob followed me into the hallway, his face tight with barely concealed frustration. You couldn't just let this go, could you? He hissed. I turned to him slowly, tilting my head. Would you have let it go if I had done this to you? He didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. I let out a slow breath, staring at him. This was the brother I had spent years defending. The brother I had trusted even when I shouldn't have. But this time I wasn't going to let him rewrite the ending. You should be grateful, I said finally. If I had really wanted to ruin you, I would have. Rob swallowed hard. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. I turned and walked away, feeling lighter than I had in months. I wasn't just reclaiming my business. I was reclaiming myself.